Deep strikes on Russia, Trump reacts. War with global response to Crimea occupation encouraged Russia's warlike behavior, but Ukrainians hit Black Sea cities hard. We will tell you more in this episode, so you'll be in focus. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for the latest updates. Russia's economy is collapsing, and that is the biggest progress in the context of the war in Ukraine. This was stated by US leader Donald Trump during a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. According to Trump, the Russian Federation has been waging war for 3.5 years without a clear objective. During this time, its economy has fallen into a terrible state. More details are available in a report by my colleagues.
The Russian economy is in terrible condition, stated U.S. President Donald Trump during a meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
The Russian economy is terrible right now. As you know, it's crashing. And that, frankly, Ukraine is doing a very good job of stopping this very large army. It's pretty amazing. You know, this is a war that should have ended in 3 days, 4 days. People said it was going to be very quick, and you got to hand it to the Ukrainian soldiers and everybody involved. It's still going on, and that's not a good thing for Russia.
Trump believes that Ukraine, with the support of the European Union and NATO, is capable not only of fighting, but also of reclaiming all its territory within the borders before the full-scale invasion. Previously, he had already stated that he would impose powerful sanctions and tariffs against Russia. According to him, the targets will be Russian oil and banks. During the meeting with the White House chief, the Ukrainian president urged him not to delay sanctions pressure on the Russian Federation and possibly to act a step ahead of Europe. In turn, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the American president has so far shown extraordinary patience, avoiding additional restrictions on Russia. However, the situation is changing. Russia is escalating, and Washington is ready to act.
The president has shown extraordinary patience in terms of not assessing additional sanctions in the hopes of having a breakthrough in this regard. And all has come to what appears to be not just a stagnant one, but an era, and we've entered a period of what appears to be potential even escalation, with the historically highest number of strikes we've seen over the last few nights and before. And now we are also watching incursions into neighboring airspace by both drones and airplanes. The president is a very patient man. He's very committed to peace, but his patience is not infinite.
The Kremlin stated that the Russian economy is stable despite difficulties due to sanctions, and as Putin's press secretary Peskov put it, global economic turmoil. He also noted that the Russian dictator is ready for a meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy, but without preparation, it would allegedly be fruitless. However, real figures differ from statements in Moscow. Financial Times writes that Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian Federation oil refineries have already led to diesel exports falling to the lowest level in 5 years. Since the beginning of August 2025, strikes hit 16 out of 38 Russian refineries, causing disruptions in processing capacities of more than 1 million barrels per day.
Russia is the world's second-largest exporter of diesel fuel. Roughly half of the shipments go to Turkey. Moscow is not yet restricting diesel exports abroad, unlike gasoline, which is increasingly scarce on the domestic market and in temporarily occupied territories, from a publication by Financial Times.
The publication also notes that discussions are already underway in Russia about the possibility of a complete ban on diesel fuel exports. While the Kremlin tries to convince everyone that everything is fine with the Russian Federation's economy, the country's Ministry of Finance proposed raising the value-added tax rate from 20% to 22% starting next year. After all, Putin has no intention of ending the war against Ukraine, and the money for it needs to come from somewhere. Therefore, tried-and-true methods are being used, reaching into citizens' pockets.
The strategic priority is to ensure financial support for the country's needs in defense and security, and social support for families of participants in the so-called special military operation, from an official website of Ministry of Finance of Russia.
As a reminder, Russia's expenditures on the war against Ukraine in 2024 amounted to $149 billion. According to the German Institute for International Security Issues, in the first 6 months of this year, the Kremlin's war machine consumed an average of nearly 1.5 trillion rubles per month, or just under 47 billion rubles per day. This exceeds the annual budgets of Russian regions such as Kalmykia, less than 29 billion, or the Altai Republic, nearly 43 billion rubles, reported by Yulia Hronovska, UATV News.
Ukraine carried out a series of operations in the Black Sea on September 24th, 25th. These were attacks on Russian targets in occupied Crimea, as well as oil ports in Russian Black Sea coastal cities. All of this was carried out, I remind you once again, using only Ukrainian weapons. The systematic attacks became possible thanks to long preparation since 2022, the accumulation of strike means, and the development of technologies. Watch more footage in our News Pulse Digest tonight. The weak reaction of the world to the occupation of Crimea in 2014 led to Russia's tendency toward war and violence. This was stated by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy during his speech at the 5th Crimea Platform Summit. The head of the state called on the international community to prevent the normalization of Russian aggression and emphasized that any easing of sanctions would mean, quote, tolerating new wars. Larissa Petruk will share more about what other world leaders discussed at the summit in New York.
On September 24th, the 5th summit of the Crimea Platform began in New York. This year, the event took place for the first time on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The main topics for discussion were concrete steps to restore Ukraine's territorial integrity and achieve a just peace based on the UN Charter. Participants at the summit paid special attention to the repressions that Russian security forces have only intensified over the years on the territory of the temporarily occupied peninsula.
It was in Crimea that Russia broke one of the basic rules of normal life among nations by illegally annexing our Ukrainian Crimea. It was Russia's actions in Crimea that showed many predators around the world how it can be so easy to take a piece of another state. And this is not just a piece of land, it is a piece of life. Ukraine is home to many peoples, and especially to the indigenous people of Crimea, Crimean Tatars, a people who can truly feel what home means only in Crimea. It's vital that the world keeps in mind the suffering of civilians whose lives Russia has destroyed in the occupied territories. And today, repression is the harshest in Crimea and other areas under Russian control for speaking the truth, for wanting freedom, even for faith. Crimean Tatars, Muslims are among the main targets of this repression. Imagine some Crimean prisoners have been deprived of their freedom since 2014, already 11 years.
The OSCE core principles and commitments stemming from the Helsinki Final Act mirror the central tenets of the UN Charter. They include the respect for sovereign equality, territorial integrity, the inviolability of borders, the non-intervention in internal affairs, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. These principles remain as vital as ever, despite Russia's war of aggression that blatantly violates them. Justice is a key component of sustainable peace. The territorial integrity of Ukraine must be restored. There is no place for imperialism in the 21st century. We remain committed to the UN Charter and the Helsinki principles and unwavering in our support to Ukraine and its people.
According to Freedom House, an organization that studies factors of compliance with political rights and civil liberties, as of March 2025, the Crimea indicator score dropped from 4 to 2 out of 100 possible. This is lower than in North Korea or Eritrea. Among the trends causing the greatest concern are forced disappearances and repressions based on national origin.
The process of displacing the indigenous population continues, and if Crimea is not liberated in the foreseeable future, we may predict the complete disappearance of the Crimean Tatar people as a distinct ethnic group. For Ukraine as a whole, liberating Crimea is primarily a matter of restoring its territorial integrity and ensuring its security, but for the indigenous people of Crimea, it is also a matter of survival and further development or complete disappearance as a distinct people.
Participants in the 5th summit of the Crimea Platform adopted the New York Declaration, which reaffirmed reaffirms support for Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty and calls for an end to aggression by the Federation. The document highlights violations by the Federation of Human Rights and international humanitarian law on temporarily occupied territories.
In this year, Russian courts have already handed down guilty verdicts to more than 50 people for actions that the UN Human Rights Office considers the legitimate exercise of freedom of expression. Guided by the spirit of the United Nations, we welcome the adoption of the New York Declaration and reaffirm our collective resolve to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine and the world. As our former president, Leonard Mary, once said, freedom is not something to be taken for granted. It must be defended, cherished, and shared. Today, your fight for freedom is our fight too. Alar Karas, President of Estonia.
Japan supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, including Crimea. We are deeply concerned about the suffering of those who were displaced from their home, including Crimea. Through today's meeting, we reaffirm to the international community the principle that unilateral change of the status quo by force is unacceptable. Russia continues its brutal attacks, showing no signs of concrete steps toward peace. Now is the time for us to stand united together to draw a swift and positive response from Russia.
This year, the number of summit participants reached a record high. 54 countries and 7 international organizations condemned Russia's occupation of the peninsula, reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
What's your take on all this? Share with us below. This is UATV. Stay sharp, in focus, and stay safe.